Hey, how's everybody doing? This is my first tutorial on getting started with Visual Studio and C Sharp, developing Microsoft Windows applications using C Sharp and the .NET framework. So basically, we're just going to fire up Visual Studio. I'm using Visual Studio 2015. What you're going to want to do is, if you've never used Visual Studio, you can download it off Microsoft's website, um, and you can set it up for a lot of different types of code. Basically, what I'm going to do now is just go to new project, and you can see all the different types of templates and coding that you can use Visual Studio for: Android, web, lots of different types of Windows, Windows 8, touchscreen. I mean, there's all sorts of different stuff you can do. But we're just going to do a basic Windows form application to get going here. So we'll call it getting started with with getting started with Visual Studio, or C Sharp, because that is the programming language that we'll be using. Basically, what Visual Studio does is it fires up with your first form that'll load when the project loads, and what you have is your tool strip, your menu strip across the top. What I usually keep open is my toolbox, my data sources, properties, and my solution explorer. There's a lot of other windows you can have open. If you go up to view, you can check out other windows. Everybody's different, and there's a lot of different ways to code using Visual Studio. But basically, the gist of it is these are all your controls that you can use out of your toolbox, and these are your forms that you can build if you're building uh, Windows forms. And over here is are your properties for whatever control or form that you have clicked on. So, for instance, this is the name of the form, and you can change it. Usually, the form that starts the program when you fire up your application, I call the dashboard or the splash screen sometimes, depending on what I'm doing, it changes them. And you can tell a lot of the properties are aesthetics. Some of them aren't, but some of them are properties that do a lot of different things. But for instance, we'll call this the dashboard, and it'll change the label on the top of the form. Um, and you can change the background colors and a lot of different items. Um, if you double click on your form, basically what it does is it um, goes straight to the dashboard form load event, or method. And what this does is you can type in some statements or some code so that you can make something happen when your form loads. You can also click on your form, and up here in your properties you can click on all of your events, and these are all the different events that can happen when um, this form is active or you're using this form. And you can obviously have to be creative. Sometimes, if you want to clear some text boxes when the user clicks on the form, you could use the click event. There's a lot of different things you can do, a million different ways you can code an application, so you have to be creative. But this first tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to add some basic controls to your form, and how to do a couple of common events, like a button click event or a click event in general, and some simple variables. So what we'll do here is we'll throw up um, a menu strip, and that's usually typically what you see on a a Windows application. A lot of times you see the menu strip across the top, just like in Visual Studio. It's pretty common. A lot of times you have file, open, save, and like I said, you can have whatever you want here. What we'll do here is we'll do a couple different tabs. We'll do projects, and we'll do some tasks. It's what a lot of people work on: projects and tasks. And we'll add a couple other controls. Maybe we'll add a combo box and a label. As you can see, you just drag these over. A text box is pretty common, and we'll just throw on lots of checkbox, button. We can quickly show you how a lot of these work. And a list box, we'll start with those. Every control has different properties, as you can see in your properties panel over here. You do want to get into the habit of naming all of your controls so that when you're coding your application, you can easily remember what your controls are for setting the properties of them or variables. So for our label, we could call it, we can leave them as they are now, but obviously if you make a bigger application, you're going to want to change the names of them. So for instance, this property right here is the text of that label, so you can change it. There are some you can anchor your controls, and what that does is it sets how the controls act when the form is uh, moved around or created or moved around or resized during runtime. So for instance, if we set the anchor for this list box to be the, basically what it'll do is it'll anchor it to the top, so this won't move, but these will move when the form is resized because they're anchored to the right and the bottom side of the form. So you can see now that that form changes like that, or that list box changes when we move the form. And again, these are all items that you want to kind of come up with when you're designing your form, figure out how you want your application to work. But again, every control has different properties. So for instance, a combo box, you want to add items in your collection, which basically adds the items that are going to be in the combo box. And a list box has the same idea. You can put items in the collection. And later on in some tutorials, I will go over how to bind these application or these controls to Microsoft Access databases or SQL databases, so you can pull information for your users out of a database instead of just using variables and C# coding. And your button, you can change the name of your button. A lot of times people say, well, I'll show you in a second. So if you want to debug your program, you just click on the debug, the start button up here, and what that'll do is it'll build your application. It's building right now, and and then what it does is it runs it. And so right now I can actually type in here, or I can also select an item. But the problem is what if your user changes the item? A lot of people ask, I don't want them to be able to do that. And you can see our menu strip up here. When we click on them right now, nothing happens. Same with our items or our button, nothing's going to happen. But so by changing the properties of your controls, for instance with the combo box, you can get your application to work the way you want it to. A lot of these properties you just have to learn. For instance, the drop down style, if you change this to a drop down list, now your users won't be able to change the text of your combo, and they'll only be able to select the items that are in your combo box. And that was just done by changing the properties of that control. So that's how properties work on a lot of the controls. I know we ran through it pretty quick. As you can see, the font and the real, I think, confusion with a lot of people getting started. I know it was a little bit confusing for me when I got going with C# a long time ago, was the difference between dragging over a control from the Visual Studio toolbox, which is super easy, and I think a lot of people, I don't think they take it for granted, but they forget all the coding that's done behind the scenes for these controls. Because if you go to the Microsoft website and you look up, how do I add a, open file dialog to my control or to my form, what Microsoft does is they teach you how to hard code. I call hard coding the control for your form. What I did there was I just dragged over the open file dialog, and Visual Studio generated it for me. And then I can change the name of it. And I can change some of the properties of it. And if I want to use that dialog, say on a click event, I could double click on my open menu strip item, and then I could call the show dialog method for that dialog box. And what that will do is when you click on that item, it will actually show that open file dialog. And that open file dialog is designed using the Visual Studio interface, and the properties are set right here in our properties dialog, or our properties tab. And there's our dialog. You can see the file name is open file dialog, which is this right here. If I wanted to change that, I just go over to my properties tab, Oop, just had to see if my cam's running here. I actually use Cam Studio to do my screen captures. I had to pause there for a second. My kid just came home. But anyway, so we changed the file name, and basically what you can see is by changing these properties quickly, when we debug the program, you can see how fast you can um, change the properties of different controls. This is the file name that we're looking for right there. So those are some examples. And what we did here was a click event. And again, if you click on a control and then you click on the events, these are all the different events that can be raised by that control item. You can see that the click event is attached to the this click event right there, which if we go back to our code, it's this right here. And you can actually make your own methods or events if you want them to be raised by an event of a control. You can have that happen. And so that's quickly how we can add different controls, different items. Oh, what we were talking about before was if you go to the Microsoft website, they'll show you how to hard code an item. So what we did here was this open file dialog as an example. We dragged it over from the toolbox, and what that did was it added the control. But if we wanted to just hard code a open file dialog box, what we would do is we would create the object. So basically what this is doing is you're typing in the name of the object that you want to create, and then you have to give it a name. And then you have to instantiate the object, which basically creates a space in memory for the item so that it's there, it's in your computer, it can be run in the application, and once it's created, then we can now give this new object some properties. So you type in the name of it, and then you can start giving it, or you can run a method off of the object, which is the show dialog method. But if we wanted to, these are some of the properties that you can give the new object. So the file name is what we had changed before. So what we did was we set the file name for that, and then what we'll do is we will show the dialog by calling the show dialog method. And so you can tell that that is not down here. This is called the open RCL file dialog, and this one's called the new file dialog box. And you can see there we hard coded in the property, the name of the file that we're looking for, and there it is. So that's the difference between typing your own code out for an object or creating an object, or just dragging an object over or control over from the toolbox. Obviously, it's a lot faster to drag the file or the control over, edit the properties as you'd like them to be edited, and then if you have to do anything customized, you can do it in your code or another way. But there's obviously more ways than one to do these items. Another quick thing for getting going is your error list and your task list. Um, Basically, if I have a control here and I double click on that combo box, so the selected by default, if you double click on the combo box, it's the selected index changed event is raised, and that's basically if you change the item that you selected in the combo box, this event will be raised. And just to reiterate, if you click on that combo box and you head over to your events, um, there's a lot more events that you can raise by having different things happen in your application. But if I then delete this out because, hey, I don't want it anymore, and I hit save, what's going to happen is the form doesn't know what to do because we created an event, but now it's gone. So what you're going to want to do is you can go down to your error list and you can double click on the error, and what it's showing here is that this event's no longer there anymore, so we need to delete it. And then we can go back to our form and it'll load. So the proper thing to do if you don't want the control there anymore, or if you're just getting rid of the event, you have to delete out the event in both your program file and in your form file. But if you don't want the control anymore, sometimes it's easier just to delete the control and then go into your code and delete the code behind it. And I think that's pretty much it for just getting going. Actually, we can go over to the Solution Explorer, and what this does is you're going to end up with a lot of different files as you create a larger application. If you want to add items, you just right-click on your solution, and you can add items. Say we want to add a folder to keep track of, more files that we're going to create. We can do that. If we want to rename our form, we can do that. And it'll ask us, oh, no, it didn't ask. It renamed everything for me. Sometimes it asks you if you rename something, if you want to have the application update all the files, and usually you do, because you want all your files to be updated. But say we want to add another form. It's a common thing to do. You want to obviously be able to open up a second form. You can add new classes, which we can get into later on. So we'll call this the projects form, and we'll actually add a task form too. Why not? New item, Windows form, task form. And so obviously this shows your task form. You can keep it open if you want to. I'm going to escape out of it for now. And then what we want to do is on our projects tab, we want to open up a projects form. So this is somewhat confusing part, or it was for me when I got going, where we already created a projects form using Visual Studio's interface by just right-clicking and creating a new form. And what it did was it gave us that form. And if we right-click on that, you can go to the view the code or the designer. This is what the form is going to look like, and if we want to add controls or whatever we want to it, it's all going to be added to that form. So when we call that form, we have to create the object. You still have to, even though you designed the form, you still have to instantiate it so that there's a space in memory for that form to be run on your computer. And now we can just show that form, which is what we'll do here, and the form is going to come out just the way that we've already designed it, or like I showed you before. This is the confusing part that I had a hard time with. You can add properties right in your code, or you can just add your properties to the form through the Visual Studio Designer. And so what I'm getting at is that we didn't have to, if we wanted to create a new form, we didn't have to add the form to the file. We could have created a new form through just coding it. But a lot of times, obviously, it's easier and faster just to use Visual Studio to help you out with this stuff. So now we'll call the show. So there's two big ones here for showing a form. There's show and show dialog. The show um, method will show the form, but you'll be able to run other forms at the same time. Um, whoops. And it wants me to change the name of that. And we'll do the same thing for our task form, but we'll use a show dialog, and I'll show you the difference between a show dialog and a show method. And what I was getting at with the properties earlier is if I want to add some items to my task form, so say I want to add a label and a text box, we'll throw those both up there. Those will be added to the form when the form is shown when I run it, as you'll see. So we'll click on the projects. So the difference between the show and the show dialog is I created a projects form, but I can still run other forms at the same time. Whoops. Get those fired back up. So you can see in the background, you can see Visual Studio shows you the memory usage that you're using, your CPU usage, and any other items that you want to see, which is handy once you get into some larger applications, especially calling large functions or database queries and other items. But so the difference between show dialog and show is I can run two forms at the same time, but with the show dialog, you're only allowed to run one form at a time. It runs as a dialog. I can't click on anything else. I have to end this dialog before I can do anything else I want to do. This is handy using the show method for large applications where I hate running software other people create where you can only have one window open at a time. It's just not productive in today's day and age. And what we'll also do is we'll quickly show you how to use some of the variables that we have. So you remember we created a collection of items in our combo box, item 1, 2, and 3. And this is our label 1. So on our form, or on our dashboard, you can see this is the load event. So these are items if you wanted to have something happen when the form is loaded. And this is our menu strip item. Click. This is where it's handy to name um, your objects so you remember what they went for. But so if I want to change the selected index of this combo box, and I want it to update the label, I could type in a statement which would do that. So right here we would do label 1 dot, and we find that the text property is equal to combo box 1 dot, and you could do text or you could do the selected item, the selected text or selected item to string is what I usually use. And then you can see here the functionality between using code or running using a statement for the event for this combo box when the selected item is changed. See how it only happens when the selected item is changed. It raises the event which changes the label to equal this item right here, which is handy if say you're trying to you want user you punch in all your information into a database and then you just want to be able to select the items quickly and create a report or a form and then print it out for a client or just for work. And so that's the end of this first tutorial. What we'll do here is actually our button here. What I can do is add a method here. And you guys can shoot me an email if you have questions. I'm going to be throwing up a whole bunch of C Sharp um, tutorials on all sorts of different things, printing to PDFs, printing, integrating with Microsoft Access, Microsoft Word, um, using Microsoft Access backends. There's a million different applications you can run. A lot going on, and I guess in my next tutorial, maybe I'll show you how to build an application quickly. So, but if you got any questions, you can email me at support@rcltechnology.com, or you can check me out at rcltechnology.com. I actually specialize in customized add-on for CAD software, Autodesk products, and civil engineering, architectural engineering, and lots of different construction industry add-ons for CAD software. But obviously, I like doing business solutions, and so yeah, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. Thanks for watching.